Sheraan and Mphati saying take guys seriously. So we have a rule which we try and keep up with, and it's not everyone's rule, but you know, we kind of, we don't want to take ourselves too seriously. So if someone starts a business, they've gone and put a lot of work into it, and it's important to them. Whether we think it's a good business or not, it doesn't matter, because it's their business, it's their baby. So, you know, we kind of take that quite seriously. So if you send us an email, we always try and respond. Now, the only time we don't respond is if you send it from a Gmail or a Yahoo or a Hotmail. And it's quite simply like, anyone who hasn't gone and registered their own domain, there's no way they've really gone and put proper thought into this. But if you've gone, to Sheraan's point, and you've registered a domain, you've got a basic deck, you've got a basic website, then we're going to say, look, we owe it to you, in inverted commas, because technically we don't owe you anything, but certainly you've gone and done something. You deserve the chance. It may not be for us, and we'll say it's not for us, and that doesn't matter. I mean, don't be, you know, there's lots of investors out there, but you need to have shown that you've made the effort, and that's what Sheraan was saying, is be professional, have the right stuff. If you don't know what Mphati was saying, if you don't actually know, there's nothing wrong with not knowing. There's nothing wrong with asking investors and saying, hey, listen, I'm quite new to this. Can you offer me some advice? You know, and people, I think there was a video with Steve Jobs, probably before he was asked to leave Apple, kind of in the early days, where he said he had never asked for help and someone had said no. So there was something famous when he was 12 years old. I think he wrote to Dell and he said, listen, I really like taking computers apart. Can you send me some old components? So they sent this 12-year-old kid some old components. I mean, what is in it for Dell? It said nothing. I mean, maybe it was a bad idea because Apple became a big competitor, but they didn't know that at the time. But the point is if you don't know, or if you need help, just what he did. Unfortunately, not everyone's going to help you, but 9 times out of 10, most people are trying to at least be, you know, add something to the ecosystem that they play in. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. I want to change it up a little bit and talk about scaling. What are the kind of strategies that make for effective scaling throughout South Africa, scaling into the rest of the continent, and scaling for international markets? Can we start with Sheraan on this, then Mphati and Ian, you can close us off with regards to scaling.
Well, I think first and foremost, remember, I like that word scaling, because if you scale something that's working, you're going to get more of it, and if you scale something that's broken, you're just going to get more broken stuff at scale. So I think it's important early on to keep your product very tight and actually very, very limited, as well as your business model, and try and get something to work. A lot of entrepreneurs forget that, or they think that when they raise funding, they need to scale because that's what the funders expect. But you know, been in the game long enough to know, I think at the end of the day, everyone's interested in building successful businesses. So start something small that works and then scale that. So that would be my first thought on why to scale. The second thing on scaling is, you know, scaling involves a lot of things. It involves, I mean, I'm just off the top of my head, resources, customers, technology. So I think that I'd rather comment on the pitfalls. I think it's always important to front load sales and business development, because that always has a long lead time in companies. So front load the acquisition side of the business and don't scale the technology side. A lot of companies raise funding and believe that they need to invest that in anticipated customer scale, because the technology is the thing we know how to do. So you put a lot of time and resource in technology, and the customers never arrive. It's a very, very common mistake. It gives founders a sense of control. Scale the sales first, scale the biz dev, the partnerships, etc., and invest heavily there. Then scale your tech scalability. Now, I'm saying this with the caveat that I assume the core platform is working in reasonable shape. I mean, if the core platform needs an entire rebuild, just to be viable for an enterprise customer or a couple of thousand consumers, well, then you can do it at that point. But those are just some of the common pitfalls that I find. I think the next point is really HR. It's said, common saying, but it's true, which is hire slow and fire fast. Or if you need to scale, I remember once I took my company from about 5 people to 50 people in 6 months in the past, and it was tough because we just had a single meeting and hire people, and the culture of the company changed a lot, and a lot of some bad people came through the cracks there. So I would say if you're forced to scale really quickly and you're forced to hire fast, then you hire fast. So try and hire slow and fire quickly if people aren't working out. And if you're forced to hire fast, then just know how to get rid of non-performers or non-culture fits. I think the most important thing you want are people with brains and high performance, but you need people with cultures and values fit as you scale. Because again, another common saying is make sure you hire people with the same values and with the ethics that your company plays by. Because if you hire very, very smart people with completely different values, they'll sink you very, very quickly as a team. And I've been there, and it's tough. So if you manage the people well, I think to an extent the rest takes care of itself.
Thank you so much, Sheraan. Mphati, you still remember the question?
Yes, I do. Yeah, we're currently still in the process, of this whole scaling thing. And I must agree with a lot of points that Sheraan made around making sure your product is at least fit for the market before you start selling it. Like I said, I come from a sales background. So, put a product in my hand, I want to find a client as fast as possible and make my first rand. But then you end up putting a product in the client's hands that's broken or has a lot of issues, or you haven't figured out a lot of the customer service operations. It hurts you. So you end up going back to the drawing board and, fixing up your product, and then having to go out there and, map out the operations and the customer service, etc. So throughout this entire process, I'm just realizing more and more that it's not really so much about how many customers we can get out, we can get as quickly as possible, but how ready are we for those customers? And the more ready we are, the more we seem to get new clients. The more ready we are, the more it seems we're getting meetings that we otherwise would have struggled before. So on my side, it's just more the internal preparation of the team and the company before it really starts putting in a huge amount of finance into marketing or, amazing campaigns. I'm frugal. So, every rand that we spend, I need to make sure that there has to be great value internally and externally. And the reason for that is, for every rand that we waste, it makes scaling that much harder. So maybe we would have had 6 months to do something incredible, but we misused money and now we've got 4. Or we, like Sheraan was saying, you hire the wrong person, too quickly, or you haven't checked all these things properly, and it hurts the development cycle of the product. So on my side, I think it's great to grow fast, but just make sure your foundation is set, or at least be ready for all the challenges that come with a shaky foundation, if that is still the strategy. But it does happen naturally the more put together the business is internally. It somehow seems to just happen organically. I think that'd be my 2 cents on that one.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Ian, you must be proud. Your portfolio founders say such incredible things. And but your thoughts on scaling, sir?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll look at it more from a kind of a theoretical point of view. So I mean, what Sheraan was saying is don't scale for the sake of scale. Even question whether there is a market to scale into. So when you start a business, you often are solving a problem that is either quite personal to you or to your community, or you've been done overseas and you think it's applicable here. It's very rare that someone kind of says, listen, just thought of something that is absolutely unrelated to my life and my life experiences. It always has some personal importance as an entrepreneur. Because it's personal to you, because it is meaningful to you, doesn't mean it will be meaningful to others. It can mean that it will be meaningful to others. And the reason I'm kind of having this theoretical, spiritual sort of discussion with myself, I guess, is that you have to be very careful not to be arrogant to believe that because it's personal and relevant to you, other people will care. So when you say scale, you say, well, is there a market to scale into? You know, if I build something, they say, if you build it, they'll come. Look, I've seen a lot of people build nice stuff and no one came. So I'm afraid, you know, it's a nice saying, but it doesn't always work. So it's kind of don't scale for scale's sake. And the thing is, scaling is very much, you know, obviously we all get caught up in the big US metrics. You say, well, you've got to get this, you know, KVR, and you've got to get these metrics and blah, 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 blah. Like that works well in that market, and I'm not criticizing it, right? But in our market, and I'm talking specifically more South Africa for this particular point. Obviously, different parts of Africa have different nuances. But let's say in South Africa, we're very much dominated by, you know, 10, 20 really big corporates. So scaling doesn't necessarily, or success doesn't necessarily mean scaling. It could mean 3 customers. You know, if you're servicing 3 of the top 10 biggest JSE listed customers as a startup in South Africa, that could be enough. Does that mean that US investors are going to invest in your business? Probably not. But who cares? If your business is doing well, what do you need a US investor for? If you want to go to the US and you want to attract US investors, then you have to play the game by their rules, and then all of a sudden the scaling element becomes quite important. But that's a game that you must choose to play, right? You don't have to, you know, like, you know, it's like we have South African sports. We enjoy South African sports. We don't have to go play American football. You know, there's nothing wrong with playing a bit of soccer or cricket or rugby, using a pretty rubbish analogy. But so the question is can you scale from a customer point of view? And should you scale? You know, as I said, you could have 3 customers, and that could be amazing. You know, if you've got a business with 5 people and you're servicing 3 blue chip corporates billing a few million a month, that's pretty good. Don't get caught up in sort of the race, because it's not necessarily a race you want to be in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Just to tie up with scaling, and something that Sheraan said in the beginning, and I've also seen from Mphati's business model, you have had to partner up with some of South Africa's big corporates, incumbents in various areas. What would you say is the success strategy to use in order to partner effectively with these big corporates that dominate South Africa so well?
Well, I would say I've built my career on partnering with corporates, both internationally in the US and if you guys think raising venture capital is hard, partnering with corporates is much harder. I'll start with that. Gosh, this is so close to my heart. Look, I think the play is not dissimilar ultimately. I think I'll just give some practical advice. One is you know, you need to be innovative and showcase how you can add value in a meaningful way. I think let's assume that's taken care of. Most corporates in South Africa, it's the times are changing. Times have changed a lot in the last 10 years. They are still not looking to outsource innovation in a rapid way. So even if what you're offering is very helpful, you can expect them to ignore it a couple of times. So typically the playbook again would be some key decision makers in those corporates. I'm perfectly happy going cold to people. If you can get an introduction, even better. Again, with a tight proposal and a tight summary, and you just do it over and over and over again, and don't take for an answer. And personally, if they don't get back to you, and then eventually, it's the same ultimately, it's the same sort of sales process. I mean, they're going to be looking for a value case. They're going to be looking to evaluate you and can they trust you. And in 99% of the cases, they're not going to say yes at the first meeting. They're almost certainly going to say no. And many of them may even say, no, we're not interested, don't never come back. And what you have to do then, in my experience, is again, you do the whole, well, can we keep you posted? And they'll probably say, yeah, whatever. And then I add them to my company updates. And I take the view, well, they're not now. If I take the time frame of now to the next 4 years, I can re-engage them seriously every 6 months if I have a meeting. That's 24 meetings potentially for them to say yes. Or not 24, 8 meetings for them to say yes. And that means that only 10% will say yes. 20% more will say yes after a year or two, and the next 70% of the market will say yes after 30%. Persistence. What do you think, Mphati?
Yeah, I agree. I think with corporates, I'm having less of an issue than I am with VCs. And I think ultimately it goes back to whether or not you're offering those companies products that are close to their core business. I think a lot of the times, or where I've struggled with corporate meetings, is whenever I'm offering something that's just way off from what they're trying to do for their financial year, or it's really more of a sideline project than it is something that actually helps them improve their bottom line, I've gotten a rejection. But whenever, like you said, you go and you get your proposal done properly, you do your homework, read the financial statements. I hate accounting. And I hate reading those glorified 100-page nonsense, but in there's like these nuggets that let you know what these companies are all about. So they'll tell you where they're transforming, they'll tell you where they're investing, they tell you who the new hires are and why they're making those new hires. Things like, we had a meeting where one of the corporates we were working with, they're going on a huge drive on gender equality. So I thought, there's no way if this company is, all about gender equality and promoting people into management, that I want to put my face there. If I can put a team member's face there who heads up a division and can see that they'll be working with people who have similar value systems, and that seemed to work. And it's what's helping us with our relationships now. So yeah, corporates are a pain, but if the homework is done, and like you said, the persistence is there, eventually, something good will happen. And I think, like Ian said, you don't need all of them, right? So if your business does center around working with major corporates, you don't really need all of them. On our side, we aren't trying to work with, every corporate in the retail, pharmacy, or the manufacturing space. It's just the one good ones who are excited about what we're doing that we're eager to work with. So yeah, I think that those are my thoughts on that subject. And welcome back just on time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, not bad mouthing Joburg, but I'm struggling up here, guys. Now,
yeah. So I mean, the only thing that I would probably say is, you've kind of got to be sensitive to who you're dealing with. So, like, let's say in the tech side, you've got a whole bunch of people who have spent whatever 5-10 years building a career, maybe 20 years building a career in that corporate, and then you kind of come along as a young gun with your shiny new toy. You've got to be sensitive to the softer things. If you come in and they implement your tech, does that mean that person is obsolete, or are you going to overshadow them? I mean, there's a lot of, and I'd use the word political, but to me it's just softer. You've got to understand that you being the shiny new toy, or having the shiny new toy, could replace, what was it, the Toy Story? It was Woody and Buzz Lightyear, wasn't it? Something like that. It took Woody a long time before he liked Buzz Lightyear. I might be showing my generational age with that as an example. I'm not as old as I look. you know, so you've just got to be sensitive around the people, because ultimately it's the people who will make it happen, not necessarily the corporate. And then the only other thing that I'd say is you know, as much as we wish people, we wish people owed us something, they owe us nothing. You know, don't think that if you send them an email, they owe you a reply. They owe you nothing. God, how do you make them look good? You know, sending them an email saying, look, I want a meeting. So, well, they don't owe you a meeting, but they'll take a meeting if you are going to empower them and make them look good for their boss, as an argument, or just as a simple example. So you've got to be smart about it. You can't be arrogant about it. You know, unfortunately, people in life, although they may do you a small favor, if it steps on their toes or could put their own career at risk, they're not going to do you any favors. I think we're hostless. Sheraan's very eloquent. You can be the host.
I'll see what I can do. You know, I liked what you said, Mphati, about reading. Something I know, and you know, I'm amazed at how few entrepreneurs do that. I'd say 1% of them probably do that, and it's just a testament to like your faith in preparation. You know, there's a life, and often preparation can often pay off. I think also to Ian's point, you know, it's hard. I mean, everyone is trying to raise capital or sell something to a corporate knows that hard pain of rejection. And what's worse is it's often not even personal. You know, at least personal rejection has some emotional quality to it. It's often and that's what can drive me crazy. Sometimes existing customers that we've worked with for years can just show complete apathy and indifference to me or our platform, and it makes me so upset, because obviously this is my life. As Ian says, that's probably an unproductive emotion. You've just got to let it go, figure out what motivates them. In my view, stay polite throughout the process, because you know, again, I always say, you know, for you, that rejection of the day they, you know, the new guy gets the job and says, we're not that interested in what you have to do. That's one of the history of your entire company. And for that individual who essentially, it was just a Tuesday and on to the next one. So it takes a bit of wear and tear, and you get the hang of it. And that's why I just think, you know, I like to box. I've been boxing in my life, and I think of business that way. You just take those punches and you hang in there, and you fight another round. And if you go back round after round after round, you'll wear everybody down, and eventually they'll all do it at some point. Welcome back, Ngama.
Thank you so much, Sheraan. And as Ian said, quite eloquent to take over my spot. Gents, a question that I have, and I'm sorry if I put you on the spot with this one. Tech throughout the world, not enough female participation. How can we change this?
Well, I studied tech. I studied electrical engineering and computer science. And unfortunately, in my graduating class, which was 2007, we had 0 women. So we started with about 80 program participants. We graduated 12 in 4 years, and there were only guys left at the end. So I think this is a multifactorial problem. And my personal view, and this is only my personal view, is that we have to get people deeply interested in tech and engineering at a young age, and that will pass its way all the way through the system. You know, my cousin is a girl, just finished university, studied mechatronics, got a scholarship, and is a fantastic engineer, but she was obviously inspired in school to become an engineer. So I'm of the view we've got to start them young. I think it's very challenging to go top down and say, where's all the women? When the reality is perhaps more than 90% of the men have the engineering skills in tech. So it's unlikely that you're going to get a 50-50 representation of technically proficient female founders if they haven't even studied computer science and engineering. Now, again, I'm speaking from my perspective. Of course, you don't have to have a technical degree to start a tech business. The internet is more like an advertising agency, actually, in terms of the skill set. But that's my 2 cents worth. So certainly where I focus on inspiring and on mentoring is as young as possible. That's my take.
Thank you so much.
And I will say Ian has, he might be interested in your opinion on that.
I've got
So let's let Mphati speak, and let Ian give us a great sermon on this.
So, daughters aside, look, so I mean, it's actually quite interesting because, and I don't, as Sheraan said, it's multifaceted, and I certainly don't want to belittle a very important topic with a very quick answer. But the interesting thing on our side, I mean, in our companies, about 40% of our devs are actually female. So when you say there aren't enough, so you don't want to say there are enough, but I almost feel a lot of emphasis is put onto the fact that there are not enough founders, which I think is a fair thing to say. But being a founder is not, the be all or end all. So, you're the founder, you're the face of the business. It doesn't mean you are the business, Sheraan's got a whole team behind him, Mphati's got a whole team behind him. And the older you get, the less you actually want to be the face of the business. It's actually, you said, I wish I was a developer in the back end and no one bothered me. So, I think there is a lot of talents that maybe we're not necessarily showcasing enough. Can there be more? Certainly. But, we've got one of our businesses, a business called, it's a nutrigenetics business called, and the founder here, El Jaffe, she was, they listed sort of kind of the top 100 women in changing the kind of the biotech space globally. She was listed in it. I mean, that's pretty good. It's a pretty big world. She lives, kind of down the road from me in Cape Town. And her team is very much, her team of technicians, which are scientists, they I'd hazard a guess, probably 70 to 80% female. So I think there is a lot of talent. Maybe it's not necessarily being showcased. Certainly what Sheraan is saying at grassroots takes, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to belittle an important conversation, but certainly from our point of view, we're very excited about the amount of females that certainly are in our companies. The challenge is that not enough of them are the founders. It would be nice, but then again, not everyone has to be a founder, It's like, let's separate ego with value. Because I can tell you now, some of the data scientists in these companies who aren't the founders add more value than the founders. So it's quite a big conversation, though. I mean, and it's obviously not just a South African issue. It's a global thing. Yeah.
So much, Mphati?
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot to add in regards to this conversation and my limited experience and poor levels of vocabulary. But I think ever since I came into tech, I've come into more contact with female founders than I did male. And that's not to say there's a lot. It's just, when I started going into business, I always used to be inspired about the whole idea of being an entrepreneur because I saw a lot of people who look like me, talking about their businesses, whether it be YouTube or, they're on some TV show or I see them in the news. And I got into tech, and a lot of the coolest founders that I saw were female. And I just thought, for me, that's how you get a lot more females into this line of work or starting their own companies, is to put cool examples in front of them to say, that's Amra from Port Elizabeth, and she started X and Y business, and she's been able to grow it for so long, and that inspires people. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I don't wish entrepreneurship onto her, but if she does go on this line of work, I think already there's just amazing founders. Kimberly from Cowabunga, You know, Haley from Cut to Code. There's Sweep South, Miss Pando there. It's just awesome entrepreneurs, and the more, I guess, you know, they keep coming onto platforms like this. So, you know, having these articles written about them, I think that's just awesome. That's the best way I can think of. Otherwise, I'm not too sure.
Thank you so much, Mphati. The last question I have from my side before we take on Q&A from the panel, from the attendants, is actually for you, Ian. And every entrepreneur here is thinking about, how do I navigate into getting venture-backed funding? What are the nuances from a VC? How do you go about checking companies out for due diligence and all of the systems that you have in place? So life hack us on how to access more guys like you.
Yeah, look, I mean, the starting point is getting venture-backed funding is not the be-all or end-all. You know, don't let kind of perception distort the reality. So when you're taking on third-party funding, what you have to consider is, I'm going to, number one, dilute my own ownership in a company. So it's my baby, like I'm selling a part of Mphati's HR daughter. How does it make you feel so great, obviously? But also with that emotional part of it comes the fact that you're going to have an investor who is going to add value. Well, they should add value, and we can come to that in a second, but they're not sitting there day to day. They're not making sales. They're not closing deals, but they're still going to want a cut of the profits. And that's quite an important thing. You say, can my business support a third-party investor? If it's a VC, an angel, it doesn't matter. Can it support feeding that third party's investor's family, right? Because that's what they want. They want a return. And if you sit there saying, I'm not sure it can, then at that stage, and it may never be the case, it wouldn't be appropriate to take on a third party as an investor. So that's quite an important thing, is this is not someone, it's not an employee who's going to go and sit there and sell your saucepans. They're going to come and say, I think you should sell blue saucepans, and I know a good saucepan dealership. You should go there. That's kind of what they're going to say. The other thing related to that is around value, and it's quite an interesting one. So it was something like, there was an interview, a survey done in the US where they surveyed all the kind of VCs, and they said, how many of you think you're a strategic value-adding VC? And 80% of them said, we are. We're going to add value. All our companies are so much better because of us. That's what they said. Then they went to their portfolio companies and they said, how many of your VCs add value? And it was 20%. So 80% say I'm wonderful. 20% of the companies say, the companies say 20% of them wonderful. So every VC, every investor is going to say, I've got networks, and you must go watch the Shark's Tank again, because they all go, I've got networks, I've got this, I've got that, but they never really explain what they're going to do. You really have to question, I've got networks in the US. Who are your networks? Can I meet your networks? How many deals have you done? You've really got to interrogate them. And again, if you're taking on a third party who's not going to be closing deals, you want them to kind of be adding some sort of value. That's kind of quite important. From an investor readiness point of view, because there's different stages of where invest. I mean, we want to know that you're serious. We want to, sending us an email on a Gmail account doesn't help. But you need to have proper financial reporting. You don't need a fund, you don't need a CA running your reports, but are you keeping proper management accounts? Do you have shareholders agreements? Have you registered with SIPC? Do you have functional websites? Do you have functional emails? These are kind of basic businesses to say, look, I'm a serious person. Do you have proper contracts with my customers? You can blocks in order to kind of say that I'm serious and I do things properly. And that's quite important, having an investor is not going to trust you unless you kind of have done things the right way. I think there's a time and place for everything though. So when we invest in an early stage company with one customer, we don't go and say you must hire a financial director. But when we have a company that's kind of, operating in 80 countries around the world, you need a proper financial director. Sheraan spoke about HR. When you've got 3 people, you don't need a director of HR. that's a bit of, what are they going to do? But when you've got 30 people, you need someone who's going to go and take care of the HR functionality. Do you have someone running your technology internally from a ops point of view? Obviously, if you're a tech company, you should, but you may not be a tech company. So there's kind of a time and place for everything. But probably the last thing that I'll say is you've got to get along with the people. If you look at Sheraan and Mphati, like, we don't always agree. Sometimes they might swear under their breath. But we all like each other as people. We all respect each other as people. And we all trust each other. And that's probably the most important. And it's Sheraan, I'm excited. And I hope Sheraan's excited enough for him. And the same with Mphati. It's a very easy thing to kind of decipher. Do you want to see this person? Don't you want to see this person? So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I like that, Ian. Never, if I'm an investor, it's just a bad idea. If you get the sense of dread in your stomach, you want to feel excited. It's a good rule of thumb. Also, I want to add that the investors aren't necessarily going to do the work for you, and you may need a business big. But remember that if the company fails, or if the company is not going as you expected, or if it's going sideways, you still expect a return. And founders, that's a really difficult thing to understand, particularly when the going gets tough, because what can happen when the going gets tough, and let's face it, it's tough most of the time, they can feel quite isolated, and they think, the money's long gone that they raised, the R1 million that they raised years ago is long gone. And they kind of forget that they made a promise to these investors that, look, we're going to take this all the way, and win or lose, we're going to share. I'm going to share your whatever's left with you. And sometimes that's forgotten. So I think it's just really important, and the obligation you take on when you raise capital. And what you're making is, it's a covenant with the investor to say, look, I promise that I'm in this for a long time. I'm committed to this, and whatever happens, if we're going to, or you need to understand that they're going to be very upset if it doesn't work. It's not going to feel nice. It's hard as a founder to handle that process in a dignified way and with honesty and transparency. And nobody wants you to sort of run away and hide. And that's very common, unfortunately, among founders who come under a lot of stress and stuff. So it's not just money that you're taking on. You're taking on a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure, and it's going to be with you, from my experience, for at least 3 to 8 years. And that's only going to grow as you take on more investors. So it's a very serious undertaking.
I definitely agree with Sheraan there. When I started, I was so eager to find an investor, because I felt my business really, really needed it. And then eventually you find an investor, and like Sheraan said, you've made someone a promise, like, give me your hard-earned money and I will go make something. And when you sit down and you really think about that promise, it's no different to asking a family member to borrow some cash and promising them that you're going to bring it back. If you don't bring it back, it hurts them. And if more than anything else, it makes you look not very credible. So, think long and hard before you take someone's money. Make sure that your business, things are never going to really work out the way that you wanted. And like Ian said, if there's a good relationship between you and your VC, it's easier to come to the table without dread in your heart to say, hey, I messed up here. This is how we can readjust. This is how we want to do things going forward. Are you guys still on my side? If you're scared of your investors, it makes that conversation very, very difficult. And like Sheraan said, it's very uncomfortable. I used to dread those Friday investor calls, because I was like, oh crap, we're behind, or we're not performing, and it's too much anxiety. So think very hard before going into this arranged marriage. And if you really feel like you're ready and you're confident, then just focus on finding the right partner, and you should be fine.
Yeah, it's like before you raise investment, you might get really good at sharing good news. And after you raise investment, at knowing how to share that news.
That is very insightful. That is very insightful. Thank you, Sheraan. On the Q&A, we actually have we have 2 questions, and I think this is mostly to you, Ian. This is from Nagala Mufo, and she asked whether you invest in startups out of South Africa, to say only in South Africa and not in Cameroon, where she's from, and at what stage do you prefer to invest in?
Yeah, so look, our primary markets are South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria. And personal experience, and the further you kind of move away from that as an investor, the harder it becomes to make informed decisions. So as I said right at the beginning, a lot of our analysis is around the people, and if you don't have some sort of connection to the people, it becomes quite challenging. So at this stage, Cameroon isn't one of our kind of focus geographies. We are pushing a little bit closer in the sense that although it wouldn't be a CFA country, we are starting to look at some of the Francophone countries. There's quite a lot of interesting stuff coming there, but it would be premature for me to make any promises just yet, but super exciting part of the continent. From a stage of investment, so we are post-seed, post-revenue, all the way up until and including Series A. So quite often we would be one of the first formal investors on the cap table, and then we follow on all the way up to Series A. Post-Series A, we probably start to look to exit. We are an early stage investor. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Sheraan. Can we please get our money back? With a bit of interest. No, so we still have a long road to walk together. So I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic, thank you. And are you technology agnostic or just health tech? Because both Mphati and Sheraan are in the health tech environment. No,
that is right. So we focus on technology businesses that solve real world problems. So importantly, we avoid what we call nice to haves. So it's the worst example, and I keep on using it because I haven't thought of a better example. So like Twitter would be a wonderful investment. Obviously, the early investors there, I'm sure, have made plenty of money. But for us, we wouldn't invest in a Twitter. It's what I'd call a nice to have. It's not changing anyone's life, really. So, you know, for us, health tech, fintech, financial inclusion, business productivity, safe tech, anything around increasing efficiency around business communication, etc. Things that can improve lives or business practices or efficiencies, that's what we focus on. And you are right, health is of ours because, I mean, it doesn't get any more real world than, you know, someone's well-being and their health.
Thank you. Another question by Justin Wilkes. It speaks to a lot of what we've covered before in terms of partnering with corporates, the pros and cons, as well as partnering with VCs. Do you gents want to take a swing at it, or have we covered it in detail before?
No, I think it's a good question. You're in a paradox because the thing that's more important than a venture capital partner is a big customer, because customers solve. So one would with corporates initially as an investor makes a lot of sense. I personally am of the opinion that it's a bad move stage company, especially a seed stage company, to take investment from a corporate very early on in its journey. The reason for this is that corporates will act in their own interests, and typically their interest will involve turning the startup into some kind of technology partner to them, and putting some kind of facility on the startup. And if they feel that they got a material hand in building the company, they're going to feel very entitled to a lot of customization as well as exclusivity. So I think it's fine to take investment if you can avoid exclusivity and avoid customization. Then you only have to live with the risk number 3, which is having a corporate on your cap table, which very early on in your journey means that it might be impossible to work with their competitors. Typically, as you build your go-to-market plan, you have to assume that you're going to be working with different corporates over time, which would include competitors of the initial partners, because otherwise it's unlikely you're going to build a massive business. I mean, every industry is different, but often we give away the farm right early on, and then you realize when it's time to scale, you can't scale. So my preference would be to take VC early on, stay independent, and bring the corporates in a little bit later, even if strategically. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I've had too many bad experiences with corporates in the early stages.
Thank you so much, Sheraan. Mphati or Ian, do you want to speak to that?
I think from my side, Sheraan touched on the pros and cons that I'm aware of. I've got a few friends who started their businesses through corporates and they scaled, but the process wasn't as fun for them. And then there's some who started with corporates and the business blew up, and they ended up exiting to that corporate. But in the same token, a lot of the entrepreneurs I've met have gone through the VC model, and you get both examples, good or bad, and not really good or bad, but some more pleasant, others stressful. So it really depends on what really benefits your business in the long run. Depending on the nature of your business, sometimes a corporate approach is better because if your exit strategy is to be absorbed by the very same business that you're partnering with, then it's fantastic. You've got your foot through the door, prove yourself over a couple of years. And I think that's what happened with a company like HealthBridge and so on. You're just partnering with the right companies, and there you found your exit. And then in some cases, if you want to be independent, if the entrepreneur rockstar life is what you're all about that we see in the movies, then VCs do help you have more independence than a corporate would. But you've got to understand a lot of the resources, like Ian said, some VCs just don't give, and you've got to still go out there and figure it out. Still make those corporate partnerships. Still dig a market where you were confident one existed but wasn't the case. So I guess both sides has the pros and cons. It just depends on what the nature of your business is and what your exit strategy is.
Brilliant.
So I'm laughing a little bit because another watching, so you can laugh at me again, is there's a Netflix, I think it's a Netflix series, Silicon Valley, which is like about a startup. I don't know if anyone on this call has watched it, but you must watch it. And it's so funny because it's like these guys go through this evolution of raising VCs and partnering with corporates, and whatever they do, they manage to, we'll say screw it up, but there's a stronger word starting with an F, which I won't say on the call. I'll say it under my breath. But it's pretty funny, and the reason it's pretty funny is because it's pretty accurate. So I highly advise watching it. You'll find it a good laugh. But the one thing that I think is the funniest is they have this investor, and they kind of, the product is ready and they're about to commercialize, and he says, they're presenting to him and says, this is our commercialization strategy, we're going to get revenue. And he kind of like starts swearing at them and screaming at them, and they're like, what's going on? He says, you have to stay pre-revenue, because as soon as you post revenue, people are going to expect you to make more money, and it's going to screw up your valuation. But as long as you pre-revenue, we can make it whatever valuation we want. And he's going on and on and on. It's point of justice, because I'm not a good actor, but I would. It sort of answers a few of these questions, and it's good for a laugh as well.
Ian, I've got a few more questions. I'm going to put them all together because we're running out of time. The first one is from Chris Simpson, asking, how many females have you funded in the last 3 years? Second one is from Ticha, and he asks whether you would look at investing in foreign entrepreneurs based in South Africa to service this market. Yeah, that's about it in terms of questions directed at you.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, when we spoke about kind of the well, I suppose, are there enough female entrepreneurs being supported? So I mean, on our side, one of our companies is, one of the founders is a female. and then kind of co-founder. And so the stat there, I would say, is certainly lower than what we would want. But my kids, because it's bedtime, they're going to probably run in soon. Right on point, was talking about females. So look, so I mean, from that stat, I would, I think there's quite a big conversation. But I think from a skills point of view, a lot of the engine room, I think, and for us, that's super important. We're seeing that representation rising positively. And I think what's quite important is, certainly on our side, I mean, look, gender is important, race is important. These are hard discussions that we all have to have and be comfortable with. But for us, I mean, we're a for-profit business, and quite simply, diversification, be it gender, ethnicity, religion, diversification will always result in better decisions being made in business. So, when we look at a business and say, look, there's a lot of men who all came from Santon, we say, look, I don't think we should hire any more men from Santon. You're going to kind of get a little bit skewed, So that's something that we encourage, and I would imagine a lot of investors do encourage that. But yeah, there's a long way to go. So drama going on in the background. And then from a foreigner's point of view, I mean, look, it's quite a hard one, because what you're asking, I can see the question. It says sponsor foreigners. So, investors don't like drama. So do we have an issue supporting a non-South African business? Of course not. Do we want to get involved in kind of visas, et cetera, et cetera? That's quite a difficult one for us to kind of, it's probably a step too far. So you kind of want to make it as easy for an investor as possible. You want your company set up. You obviously want, if you're a foreigner, your work permits lined up, your skilled work permit lined up. If you're looking for international exits, you want to be positioning your IP offshore. It's make it, it's like when you're getting married, you want the lobola lined up. You don't want to rock up and say, listen, I only have one car. I know you're expecting 30, but let's, let bygones be bygones. At least have 25 cars, which is quite a lot of cars, I suppose. Let's see. 7 cars is probably okay.
You'd be surprised. Saying as a man who's done it. No, 25 starters.
Is it right? Is it right? But I show some cultural sensitivity there, at least.
There you go. Fantastic. Gents, thank you so much for participating, for engaging, and for leading such an insightful discussion with me this evening. This time, I'm going to ask Annele to come on in front and take over the session. And let's see what the startup grind has for us. Thank you so much. I unfortunately have to go do the family thing now. So I will get off this call. Thank you to all the attendees that have come. And thank you for all the questions that you have posed. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Ngoma.
As Ngoma said, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in, especially a big thank you to our panelists. I will now be playing some clips from PayFast, which is a Startup Grind sponsor. Thank you so much, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll now be ending the event for everyone. Thank you.